There seems to be a prevailing opinion around the Hobbit community that Thorin Oakenshield is a bit of an idiot. Or, at the very least, if he's not an idiot, he's a bad leader. I wholeheartedly disagree with this notion. And hopefully, as the series goes on, you'll come to share my perspective. Today, in this video, we're going to be covering a series of decisions that Thorin, Gandalf, and Bilbo make while they're trekking through the mountains, as you can tell by the title, as well as covering 3 principles, 1 advanced, 2 basic, that you need to keep in mind when you are leading a group of people. If you're new to the channel, hi, I'm Jeremiah Earl. Ever since I've been a teenager, I've been in various forms of leadership, whether as a camp counselor, as a lifeguard, briefly a camp runner, organizer of church events, organizer of war games, team captains, polar dipper, you name it. I've probably seen it if you encounter a leadership issue. I also happen to be someone who loves TV, and I was starting to notice that whenever I watched TV, I could see leadership lessons that were being expressed in the TV that I was recognizing. So the idea of this channel is that I go through TV and movies scene by scene, extrapolate the lessons that you see here, and then map them on to my experiences in the real world so that you can learn something and hopefully implement what you learn here so that you can become the leader you were born to be. Now that we've covered all that, let's dive right in. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I hold 3 principles above all others. If you don't remember anything I say, remember these 3. They are: win small victories. This is perfect for building influence within a group. Leadership is not about you, it's about the people under you. This gives the right mindset. And number 3, master your basic principles. This will carry you through all kinds of crisis your whole life if you master the basic leadership principles. Remember, those 3. Okay, so first scene. The company has parked itself on a bit of a slope. They've traveled a long ways. Philly and Killy start by telling a joke about how orcs are going to raid the camp to scare Bilbo. Bilbo gets pretty scared. Thorin comes and chastises Philly and Killy for telling such a tasteless joke, and Philly and Killy get their feelings hurt a little bit. Then Balin comes over and tells them all the glorious story of how Thorin won the victory at Moria and why he hated orcs so much and why he feels so intense about it. We hear of Thorin's exploits and a full recounting of the battle, and then Thorin turns around. First he lets the story play out because he is hearing this, and then he turns around and everyone's standing in awe and appreciation, and then he leaves. This ties into the first principle, which is stories can heal hurt feelings. Thorin was pretty sharp and intense with Philly and Killy, and if I was in Philly and Killy's position, my feelings would be pretty hurt. Now, this isn't like a big deal. They got chastised for telling a bad joke, but that's how dissent forms in a group. It starts really small. And if this is left untreated, Philly and Killy might start looking at Thorin differently. And suddenly, Thorin's leadership style would be grating, and issues would start to develop, all because a simple chastisement was left untreated. Luckily for Thorin, Balin comes in with a well-timed story to heal all their hurt feelings. I have actually experienced something similar in my life. I was in the position of Philly and Killy. For a very long time, had a super negative view of my mother's father, my grandfather. I viewed him as an overactive, hypocritical, and outdated zealot. He's a very passionate Christian. And one day, I was complaining about him to Mom, and she told me a story that I had never heard before, and it completely changed my view of him. When he was my age, so this would have been, I think, in the 70s, he and his family, who were also super Christian, were going to a church. When he was about 16, he really did not believe in God, contrary to what he does now. I would call him an atheist. And he was sitting there, and what the pastor was saying was just grating on him. He was like, I don't believe this. So in the middle of the pastor's sermon, he got up in front of the whole congregation, stood onto the stage, interrupted the pastor, and cried out, God, where are you? I don't believe in you. Show yourself to me. And he got down on his hands and knees and he prayed. And obviously the pastor didn't like that, the church didn't like that, and they complained to his parents, my great-grandparents, and they told him to stop. However, the next Sunday, he did it again. And the next Sunday after that, he did it again. And then after that, he got a group of boys and teenagers who were also feeling the same thing to do it with him. and they all went on stage and they said the same thing. And it grew and it grew and it grew. Days went by, and eventually they had a group of about 50 kids who were all doing this. Eventually, my grandfather had a religious conversion. He felt God descend on him, all that. He and his family got kicked out of that church because of his actions. He and his father, my great-grandfather, decided that they had stumbled on something. And so they brought all the kids together that had gone with them and their families, and they went and they started their own church. So after hearing that story, my perspective completely changed about him. Because it went from, you're an old, outdated zealot, to, wow, you were a bold and impressive leader of men. I had never thought to look at my grandfather that way. But that is the power of a good, well-told story. I experienced it, Philly and Killy experienced it, and remember, if you're in a group and you feel people are starting to dislike you, or there's hurt feelings that are kind of starting to build up, a well-timed story about your most impressive exploits in the past can awe them into, celebrating you again. Remember, stories can heal hurt feelings. Okay, on to the next scene. So, Bilbo and the dwarves go forward from where they were when they told the story, and they encounter a bunch of trolls. A couple of shenanigans later, there's a vicious fight, and the trolls end up capturing everyone. Then, the trolls are cooking the dwarves over the fire with Bilbo and a couple others over to the side, and they're arguing about how to cook them because they need to hurry up, or otherwise they'll be turned to stone in the morning. Bilbo hears this and decides to speak up, and tries putting forth different ideas out to convince the trolls to either stall, or to take longer so they turn to stone, or to let the dwarves go. Ultimately, nothing about what he says is successful, but it does buy crucial time in stalling, which allows Gandalf to arrive, cleave a rock in two, shine sunlight on the trolls, and suddenly they're turned to stone. Bilbo didn't have to do that. He could have waited for someone else to speak up, or he could have remained silent and just hoped that it worked out. But he sensed an opportunity, and so he spoke up, at potentially great risk to himself. This ties into the second principle, and the first basic one. So remember, memorize your basics. It is, take initiative. This is the principle I've always had the roughest relationship with, because I feel like it's a little too simple to be useful. Or at least that's what I felt when I first was told it. I think by my father. When he told it to me when I was about 15, I think I rolled my eyes, because I'm like, that's broad. I can't use that anywhere. How am I supposed to take initiative? On what? What does that look like? Not very helpful. So I ignored it. But as I grew older, I realized that because of how broad it was, I could apply it to any situation I was in. And because of how simple it was super easy to enact and do on my own time. Being a leader can be as simple as taking initiative to do something that nobody else is doing around you. For instance, Bilbo. He takes initiative to speak up to the trolls at potential risk to himself where no other dwarves are doing it, to stall for time. And if he succeeds, he wins some influence in the group and is looked at in higher esteem. Just take initiative. Just do things. Look around, see what's not being done. Being a leader is as simple as taking initiative on a project or even just a decision. Remember, it's a basic one, so memorize. Take initiative. After the dwarves and Bilbo and Gandalf escaped from the trolls, they managed to find the trolls' hoard where they kept all their stolen goods. Along the way, Gandalf, Thor, and Bilbo all get really cool elf swords that glow blue when orcs are nearby. Suddenly, they get ambushed by one of Gandalf's wizard friends, Radagast. He informs them that an orc pack is really close behind them. They come up with a plan for how to escape because all around them are empty fields. They're going to get overrun unless they do something smart. So Radagast breaks out in the bushes, distracts the orcs who chase them, allowing Gandalf and the group to escape overland. Now, something interesting that's happening when they're running over the fields is that Gandalf is the one who's guiding them. He's the one that's saying run, he's the one making sure nobody's falling behind, he's the one that's counting them, making sure everyone's accounted for. But he's not often in the front. Thorin is. He's always in the front, he's always yelling charge and whatnot. But he's not the one guiding the group. Gandalf is. Sometimes he's in the front when he's trying to make sure they're not getting ambushed, but sometimes he's in the back, and sometimes he's in the middle. This ties into the third and final principle of this video. It's a basic one, so memorize it. It is, A leader's responsibility is to the whole group. This is something Hollywood always seems to get wrong. They say, if you're a leader of men, you have to be in the front, fighting in the thick of it, giving heroic speeches. This is actually where Thorin spends an enormous amount of time in the Hobbit movies. Almost every situation we've seen up until now has been him leading in the front. And there are advantages to that, and that can be your leadership style. However, there are some disadvantages to this. The primary disadvantage of being in the front is you can't see what's going on behind you. So if someone is falling behind, or there's chaotic mess that you need to fix, you can't see it back there because you're too busy being in front. If you watch my other Hobbit video, you might remember that I said a leader's responsibility is to go where the most danger is. Now, you may be asking, isn't the front the most dangerous? Not necessarily. Because sometimes your job as a leader requires you to step away from the front where other things are happening. So for instance, let's say Bomber, the really fat one, is falling behind. Gandalf's position isn't then to go to the front and lead them to the charge. It's for him to stop running, go backwards, grab the fat man, and bring him along. In that scenario, I'd argue being in the back is more dangerous because there's an orc pack chasing him. At the front is the furthest away from the danger. This is really simple. Your responsibility as a leader is to be in charge of the group and to keep it as intact as you possibly can. This means sometimes you have to go to other spots away from the front, like the middle or the back. Remember, this is the basic one, so memorize. Leader's responsibility is to the whole group. Okay, let's sum up what the principles were. We have principle number 1, stories can heal hurt feelings. If you're feeling some discontent around you, maybe a well-timed story about your about your most exemplary past exploit would help things move along. Principle number 2, which is a basic, take initiative. Being a leader can be as simple as doing something that no one else is doing right now. And number 3, a leader's responsibility is to the whole group. You do not have to be in the front the whole time. There are advantages to this, but there are disadvantages because a leader is required to be where the group needs him most, and sometimes that's away from the front. Okay, that wraps up this video. Bilbo has won a small to medium-sized small victory in front of the group, so his influence has risen. We saw Gandalf take command of the group, and we saw one of Thorin's exploits be used to heal some hurt feelings. Next time, join us as the group dives into what I would argue are worse problems as they get captured, almost tortured, and killed by both the orc pack and a bunch of goblins. Think to yourself, what are some stories that you have that you could share with someone that would inspire awe? Do you have any? Have you ever experienced having a change of opinion in heart over someone who did tell an amazing story that changed your opinion? What was it? Comment your answer down below. I hope you'll join me for the next episode of this series. Like and subscribe, and remember, we're going through this so that you can become the leader you were born to be. I hope you have a fantastic day.
Take up arms. Fight! Fight!